Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I'm watching Being President, the Most Deadly Job in America by CGP Grey. I assume it's the most dangerous job because it's the President of the US. That's a massive target on your back. Although I would assume that any position in politics would paint a massive target on your back. Especially because there's going to be a certain part of the population that just doesn't like you very much. So let's check it out. Link to the original video will be down in the description below.
When the president dies, who becomes the president? Well, the Constitution says what happens next is the vice president assumes the powers and duties of the office. Simple enough, but one backup president is none backup president. So what happens next? The Constitution left this question as homework for the new Congress. Important homework, yes. Due date, no. So Congress sort of worked on succession with inconsistent and conflicting drafts, but mostly procrastinated on properly finishing for 200 years, finally turning in the 25th
I feel like that's
Amendment.
something important that should have been done immediately.
In the meantime, a president had died in office not once, not twice, not thrice, not quadrice, not quintice, not hexice, nor septice, but octagonalice. 4 natural causes, 4 assassinations. It was Garfield and McKinley. This survival record was only 80%, and even counting to today, the president is technically the most deadly job in America. But the odds are, when you become president, you must roll the celestial 2d6, and if you roll a 7, you die in office. Woof. Don't spend a most deadly job in America. But the
Does it make sense to count dying by natural causes while in office? Even if you don't, though it's still the deadliest job. Well, I wouldn't count it because it's natural causes. Shouldn't really count towards this, at least.
The odds are, when you become president, you must roll the celestial 2d6, and if you roll a 7, you die in office. Woof. Don't spend a lot of time in Vegas with those odds. So the Veep becomes the Peep and picks a new Veep who must be confirmed by a majority vote of both houses of Congress.
Okay.
If this happens quickly, then hunky-dory. Everything is reset.
There we go.
But
We have another
getting a
vice
VP nominee approved
president.
might take some time, during which the former VP, who is now the president, who is not immortal, must cast the dice and could roll a 7. The office of the vice president has been vacant for more than a baker's dozen of times in United States history, which, given the historical state of Congress's homework at the time, put the peaceful transfer of power in a precarious position. For example, the first time a president died in office, the 9th by the way, didn't even make it to double digits, no one knew what should happen.
Jeez.
The then VP just grabbed a judge to administer the oath of the presidency to become number 10, and spent the rest of his term arguing with Congress and the nation about if he was really the president or the acting president. Which seems a little, who cares, what's the difference? But there is the office of the president and there are the powers and duties of the office, which are not quite the same thing. See, it's not just death that can remove a president. A president can resign, a president can be impeached, and a president can be enabled to discharge the powers and duties of the office. This last enable is from the Constitution, which makes no attempt to define what enable means. A president can volunteer themselves to be enabled, for example, during physical illness, upon which they don't leave the office, but the VP gets the powers and duties of the office and becomes acting president. This, on a tiny scale, has happened a few times when the president has undergone non-trivial surgery. A reason for this being to ensure nuclear weapons command and control is maintained at all times. So don't get any ideas.
That's
but also,
important.
you don't get any ideas. I'm still the president. Power reverts as soon as this is over, and it will, assuming death doesn't make a bedside visit. Anyway, inability is a subjective sliding scale. A president could be perceived as mentally unable by some, or become so mentally unable.
Okay, this point about mental inability. Pretty sure in the US, if you're Democrat and the president chosen was Republican, like right now Trump, pretty sure most Democrats will say that the president is mentally unable. And if it was the other way around, the conservatives would probably say that Harris is mentally unable. Although Biden definitely was not suited to be president.
As to be unable to declare themselves unable, or become physically unable yet simply refuse to declare it. Here, the 25th Amendment allows for the vice president to perform a kind of gentle coup. Okay, the president has 15 top-level advisors we will get to later. If the VP can get a majority of advisors to state in writing the president is unable, the VP gets the powers and duties of the office. The president can challenge this, getting a moment to try and consolidate keys to power, but if the VP and advisors reaffirm the president is indeed unable, the VP is acting president and a 21-day countdown clock begins. What happens
Why
next
21
is
days?
up to Congress. If they do nothing, when the clock runs out, presidential power returns to the president. But if within the 21 days Congress votes with a 2/3 majority that the president is inable, then the vice president is permanently acting president. And the president is still around? Awkward. Obviously, this would be a
Very
real
weird.
delicate maneuver for any VP to pull off, particularly as the president can dismiss their advisors for any reason as long as the president holds the powers and duties of the office. So,
Yeah, I don't think this type of situation is ever going to happen considering Biden didn't get replaced by his vice president. And we all know what Biden was like.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put
So if he didn't get voted out, no one else probably will.
getting advisors on board would be challenging. Case in point, in 1919, the president suffered a stroke and was mostly blinded and partly paralyzed. Don't worry, no big deal. The president just doesn't want to talk to the public or meet with his VP
Wow.
or consult with his advisors or leave the White House
Or
at
just
all
do
for a
anything.
year and a half. And during this time, there was no move by the VP to declare the president unable. But there might be a way around the VP. The 25th has this line about Congress appointing like its own committee to determine the president unable. But the way it's worded is a little unclear. Does it mean the VP and advisors or Congress committee determine inability, or does it mean the VP and advisors or Congress committee? If the latter interpretation, that means Congress alone has the power to appoint a committee with the power to remove the power of the president unilaterally. But as always with unclear interpretations, were they to happen for realsies, someone might want to weigh in on it. So those are the four or five ways a president can get removed from office. But one of them is clearly the most popular, so let's talk about what the Finnish congressional
I feel like these things should have been clarified a long time ago. The President of the United States is way too important of a position to not be clear in every single way. Like every single thing that could possibly change who the president is should be 100% clear. There shouldn't be any situations like this. This should have been solved a long time ago.
homework says about succession. First, the doubt that began with President 10 is dispelled by the 25th. When the president dies, the vice president becomes the president. Enable equals VP acting president. Dead equals VP president. But if both the president and the vice roll sevens, the order of succession is set. And first up is the speaker, who is the elected leader from within the House of Representatives. And next is the president pro tempore of the Senate, who is the longest serving senator. Not automatically, but elected by tradition. Gee, that's a funny thing to mention now. I'm sure it won't matter later. Senators tend to serve for a long time, so the president pro tempore is often in their 80s, with the record holder being 98.
God.
Just worth noting, it was up to Congress to
98.
set succession order, and Congress just so happened to pick the two most powerful members of Congress as next in line from the VP. After Congress, succession moves to the cabinet. These are the advisors mentioned before. Each here has the title of secretary and are secretary of a same-name department. Explaining each in detail would take too long because it would be to explain the entire structure of the executive branch, which is enormous. And some of their names give you the idea, but some of them don't. For example, number 4 in line, the Secretary of State, who runs the Department of State, which has nothing to do with the states, but everything outside the states. The Secretary of State is first in the cabinet because managing the foreign relations of the federal government is a pretty big deal that requires you to be on at least decent speaking terms with other countries. A good thing should say you need their support during a sudden transition of power. The Secretary of State is first among the founding 4 appointed by the first president. The others, Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of War, and Secretary of Justice. Oh wait, Fancy Pants
So
here
just the
wants to
4
be
more
called the
most
Attorney
important
General,
ones.
but just so happens to be in charge of the Department of Justice. So the oldest departments have their secretaries in 4, 5, 6, 7 order of succession. Now from here, Congress decided the rest should continue on seniority, not for people, but departments, which has led to an interesting order. Secretary of the Interior is next up because in the 1800s, young America realized she had a lot of interior land to manage and created the Department of the Interior to manage the land and the Indians on the land. No, there's no time. And land needs to be farmed and managed, so the Department of Agriculture. And then in 1900s Part 1, America wanted to develop commerce and labor, and Part 2, Health and Human Services, and Housing and Urban Development, and transportation between those urban developments, and energy for those developments, and overseeing nuclear weapons. There really isn't time. And education. Meanwhile, that Department of War, renamed Department of Defense, created veterans, and so also the Department of Veterans Affairs. All done until 2001, Department of Homeland Security. So the order is more historical happenstance order, not legislators sat down and thought it through order. Not to cast shade on the Secretary of Education, but if something has happened where the first 15 backups are out of order, that sounds a lot like a Homeland Security issue. In addition to
I highly doubt that's
order,
going to happen,
everyone
though.
below VP, if their spot in succession comes up, they are required to resign their current position to become, wait for it, acting president, most likely serving the rest of the president's term. Why most likely? Well, one of Congress's homework attempts raises an issue called bumping with this paragraph, saying the acting president serves the rest of the term unless a prior entitled individual is able to. Oh, it's another interpretation problem.
What?
This does or doesn't mean new appointees take priority and bump those lower on the list out of the office instantly. Here's the worst case interpretation and scenario. Imagine while Congress is on recess, the President, VP, both leaders of Congress, and the Secretary of State all roll sevens. The Secretary of Treasury becomes acting president and appoints a new Secretary of State, who is higher on the list, bumping the acting Treasurer President off, who is now unemployed, at least until reconfirmed. And of course, the new Secretary of State is needed.
It's just going to keep going until the next Vice President
the Senate
is once again the President.
Pro tempore, who is higher on the list and then must resign to become acting president, bumping the current acting president, who was the Secretary of State but is now just unemployed. And then the House elects their new speaker, bump again. While there is debate about bumping constitutionality, the point is it's still President 10 all over again. Uncertainty is the whole problem. After a government decapitation, just the potential of rapid-fire changes in power is exactly
Thank God
what
this
you
has
don't
never
want
actually
to be
happened.
even debatable when nuclear command and control is on the table in what would obviously be trying times. So maybe a couple more revisions on that homework are due, but whatever. This is the current
maybe a couple
order. And
hundred.
since the 1950s, for no particular reason, it's been policy to never let all of these people in a room together at once. So when you're watching the next State of the Union address, if you want something to occupy your mind during all the clapping, you can play Guess Who's the Designated Survivor, knocking down successors as you spot them to figure out who isn't there, secreted away in a secure location to be the final backup.
Jesus Christ. What a mess of a system. Thank God the situation has never actually gotten to this point where they have to choose anyone below the vice president, because this whole system is just a complete and utter mess. They definitely should look more into this, try and make it more clear, maybe change some stuff as well to avoid confusion. I would like to say that a situation like this would never affect me because I'm not an American, but it probably would, because it's the US, most powerful and influential country in the world. I live in Poland, a US ally, so it would probably affect my country, and therefore me, in some way. Probably a very small way, but it would still affect me somehow, probably. I'm honestly not really sure about this title, being president, most deadly job in America. This feels more like a video that's just explaining how complicated the system of succession is. Because most deadly job in America, being president, can just be explained in one sentence. You have a massive target on your back, because there's many people who would like to kill you. And the rest of the video is just explaining how confusing and convoluted this succession system is. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider subscribing and leaving a like. If you're interested, why not watch this video right here? And with that, I hope I'll see you in the next video.